Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel, a channel that's been very quiet lately. I have been spending a lot of my free time just reading and not so much writing reviews and posting reviews like I probably should be, but if there's anything that will bring me out of my bookish lair, it's the new day of a new Historathon quarter, and today is that day. It's October the 1st, so it's the first day of quarter 4. The third year of Historathon, about to start the fourth year next year, hopefully. And I just wanted to tell you what we're doing with Historathon. We're reading everything and anything written in or about years 1820 to the present day. So I have 10 books here. 2 are sort of paired with other things, so maybe 12 in total. And these are books, I haven't read a single one of them, but they're just things I'm thinking about. So I can't really say they're recommendations, but they're just on my list. And I'm going to start out with 3 books that I have promised a friend of mine in Discord, our Discord server, which I will link below if you're interested. Feel free to come and join us and talk about books and trade recommendations and everything. That I'm going to read with him ambitiously, because 2 of them are pretty long. The first one is not, but the second 2 are. And I will start off with the first one is, let me pull up my little thing here, is this. It is from Yale University Press. It's called Liberalism Against Itself by Samuel Moyn. It came out in 2023, and it looks at a number of intellectuals in the 20th century, people working in the liberal tradition, roughly, and namely Isaiah Berlin, Judith Sklar, Karl Popper, Gertrude Himmelfarb, Lionel Trilling, and Hannah Arendt. And he argues, Samuel Moyn argues, that the Cold War basically made liberalism a little bit more defensive than it was before the war. That it turned it into a crusade against communism and socialism, as opposed to what it used to be, which is sort of a visionary pursuit of justice and social change for the better and for human flourishing. So a look at how a short book on how 5 or 6 intellectuals during the 20th century reacted to the Cold War. We have also talked about reading this book, which has been on my bookshelf for probably the better part of 15 or 20 years. But he just showed it to me in a picture of books that he was thinking about. And I said, oh, I have that. Just didn't plan to be looking for something I had, but I do have this. This is The Greatest Benefit to Mankind. Let me see that subtitle. A medical history of humanity. And this is published in 1997. It is from Norton Publishers. And it's basically a survey of the history of medicine from ancient Egypt and ancient Greece up through the 20th century. It hits on, all the high points that you would expect: the scientific revolution and germ theory and the invention of anesthesia and all that good stuff. Maybe it'll talk about vaccines causing autism or something. I don't know. What do you think? Maybe the last chapter. And we also talked about, in the same vein of the history of science, history of medicine, a biography. And it is this, another book I've had since at least before I moved into this house, which was in 2013. This is Peter Gay's A Freud, A Life for Our Time. And this was originally published in 1988, but it is one of the better known popular biographies of Freud. It looks at his early life in Vienna, And at the very end of his life, his immigration to England, his exile to England, really, in the wake of rising fascism in Austria. Germany and Austria. It's kind of an intellectual biography because it talks about some of the ideas that he's known for, the unconscious, the Oedipus complex, ego, id, superego, all that good stuff, but also talks about his relationships with other people who came to be influential in the field of psychoanalysis. People like Carl Jung and Alfred Adler and Ferenczi, the Hungarian, I think, psychiatrist. So, a nice big biography of Freud. Hopefully we will find time for those. The second two were 800 pages apiece, so we'll see. Next, something small about World War II. This is a book from Verso Press. I love Verso. They publish a lot of really interesting stuff, very editorially left of center, but just balance it out with some Liberty Fund books on the other end, and you should be pretty good to go. This is Ernst Mandel's The Meaning of the Second World War. And Ernst Mandel was an economist, he was a Marxist, and he was also a Holocaust survivor. And he argues, this is sort of a Marxist analysis of the causes of World War II. And he argues, as you would probably expect from a Marxist, that World War II wasn't so much about democracy and fascism colliding and having a conflict with one another, but rather it was an emergent property of increasing global wealth disparity and the fight for capitalism's economic and imperial dominance. If you can hear that in the background, that is my cat, at least one of them, having a good old time at midnight, and they never stop. They never stop. They are on the younger side, so hopefully they'll get less rambunctious with time. But Verso, one of their books I have had for a couple of years and haven't gotten around to, The Second Meaning of the World War, the Meaning of the Second World War by Ernst Mandel. This is a nice big general survey I have had, and I think I got this at a library sale a while ago. I always see it on reading lists. This is one of the more famous surveys on the topic. It's by Albert Hourani, and it is called A History of the Arab Peoples. And like I said, it's a survey from the early 7th century, so around the time of Muhammad, through the 20th century. This was published in 1991. So it covers the spread of Islam, the rise of the major caliphates, and then as time goes on, of course, European colonialism, Arab nationalism, independence movements, etc., into the 20th century. But not a huge book, but covers a huge span of time. There is a Arab history / Muslim religion reading project I have in my head, but it has a lot of books in it, and knowing the way I'm sort of a mood reader, I don't know how far I would ever get into it if I actually formally started it. So I'm not going to call it a project. I'm just going to try to read this. Another book. I'm realizing how I am trying to clear my shelves off of old unread books as I'm going through this list. Hello. It's my cat. That's the... Oh, I don't think so. Okay. This is This book, it must be so old, I can't even find this version of it on Goodreads. This is The Rise of the Gulag, Intellectual Origins of Leninism by Alain Besançon. And Besançon was a French intellectual and writer, just died 5 or 10 years ago. And this looks at philosophical and intellectual origins of Leninism, which of course took Marxism and expounded upon it in several ways. And Besançon says that one of the things Leninism did to Marxism was make it more ideologically rigid and unyielding, partially through the use of terror and violence that it inflicted on the populace. And also argues that the system of gulags, the culmination of Leninism, has roots in earlier systems of thought like Hegelian dialectics, Enlightenment rationalism, and utopian socialism. So there's also a little bit of the dialectic of Enlightenment by Horkheimer and Adorno, maybe. I know this was written well after that. This was written in 1977. But I wonder if there will be anything like the argument they make in The Dialectic of Enlightenment, The Rise of the Gulag, by Alain Besançon. Okay, the first pair of the books that are, a pair. These next two sort of go together. The first one is A Nervous Splendor, Vienna, 1888-1889, by Frederick Morton. Published in 1979, it is a look at Vienna toward the end of the 19th century, specifically in the years 1888 and 1889, which just happens to be the year of the suicide of Crown Prince Rudolf. Rudolf was the son of Franz Josef, the Emperor of Austria, and he also married, what was her name? Princess Sophie of Belgium, who happened to be the daughter of Leopold II, the psychopath who killed millions of people in the Belgian Congo. But one day in 1889, Rudolf and his 17-year-old mistress committed dual suicide at his hunting lodge, and in a sort of country hunting lodge. And it uses that fact, that dual suicide, set against personal stories and sort of cultural and social details about the time to paint a picture of Vienna, but also kind of suggests, as I understand it, that Rudolph's suicide was indicative of deeper rooting problems that were bubbling underneath the surface of the Habsburg monarchy. So, A Nervous Splendor. I have this edition of A Nervous Splendor, and then I have a completely different edition of the book that is sort of paired with it, which is by the same author. It is just 25 years later. Still Vienna. Still the same thing, still a sort of cultural, social history. Except we're not in 1888, 1889 anymore. We are in 1913, 1914. So right on the cusp of the war. World War I. This looks at, like I said, Vienna, 25 years later, leading up to another royal death, this time the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and still looking at contemporary art, life, cultural stuff, but also growing political instability and the decline of the aristocracy. So, two books that I found at different times, but I knew they were of a piece, so I'm glad I have them both. I want to read them together, because that, I think, would be the ideal reading experience. something from one of my favorite university presses, which I badly need to show you some books from. Badly, badly. They have been stacking up over the past 2 or 3 months, and I've been obviously remiss in showing them to you. This is from 2022. This is Up from the Depths. Herman Melville, Lewis Mumford, and Rediscovery in Dark Times by Aaron Sachs. And this looks at the lives of two people, Herman Melville and Lewis Mumford, who I didn't know were as related as they were. Apparently, Mumford wrote a biography of Melville in the late 20s, which had a big part in the so-called Melville revival that happened in the early part of the 20th century. But he talks about how the insights of Mumford and Melville can be used to sort of reflect on and deal with some of the consequences that we're dealing with in modernity, like fascism, industrialization, a sense of social anomie and disparateness from other people, things like that. And more broadly, I think it is a reflection on the way we can read writers in a way that fosters resilience in ourselves. It helps us shore up a sense of imagination and helps us deal with despair and build ethical clarity when we need it most. And I was sort of fascinated by the premise. I didn't know when I ordered it the relationship between Mumford and Melville, but I love the whole idea behind the book. And if you have a 19th century American author who is great, you have to have a 20th century American author who's absolutely off his rocker. And I have one of those too, another literary biography, this time by John Tittle, I'll say, with a blurb on the back from Leon Edel, the famous multi-volume biographer of Henry James. This is Ezra Pound, The Solitary Volcano. That's one word for him, or two words, I should say, by John Tittle. This is apparently looks at Pound's role in the development of modernist poetry and the other figures that were important in it, people like T.S. Eliot, etc. But also confronts some of his, let's say, problematic opinions, like the fact that he was a Mussolini supporter and a rampant anti-Semite and a fascist, and on and on and on. But this, I think, won a Pulitzer Prize for biography back when it was published, the 87, 88, something like that. Again, sitting on my shelf for a while, trying to find an opportunity to polish it off. And two more books that are sort of a piece. I read the first book of this trilogy. I don't have a whole trilogy here, I just have two. I have books 2 and 3. I read the first one a long time ago, 15 years ago probably, and loved it. Wrote a review for it. I think a review for it is on this channel somewhere. Put it on my Goodreads and everything. And then it never really got around to volumes 2 and 3. Here is volume 2. It is a trilogy you probably know about if you are a history fan, certainly if you're a World War II history fan. This is by Richard J. Evans. It is volume 2 of his famous, relatively well-known World War II trilogy, The Third Reich in Power. It came out in 2005. I can't believe this thing has been sitting on my shelf for so long. It has been almost 20 years. And this looks at Germany from 1933 to 1939, which would be the years between Hitler's election and right up to the beginning of the war. And looks at the dismantling of democratic institutions in the Weimar Republic, how propaganda worked, how surveillance operated, daily life under fascism, the evolution of Nazi racial policies, and Hitler's economic and military expansions up toward the end of the book that led up to the war, which takes us into book 3 of the trilogy, which is also by Richard J. Evans, and is called The Third Reich at War, which takes you from 1939 to 1945. So this looks at the concept of total war, the brutal violence on the Eastern Front, all that was going on with groups like the Einsatzgruppen, with sort of a focus on the Holocaust and the whole concept of industrialized mass murder, really. And toward the end, as Germans realized that they really didn't have too much of a chance to win the war, the growing disillusionment with Hitler's regime, and then, of course, the final collapse of the party. Sorry to end on such a bummer of a note, but it just happened to be where it was in the list. If you are interested in books like this, not necessarily ones that span 1820 to the present day, but books that I usually read and review on my channel, stick around over the next couple of months. I have tons of reviews to catch up on. I also have a lot of new books to show, both from the library and from university presses. They've been coming to me. They don't stop. I just stopped making videos, but the books keep floating in. They've been very generous over the past couple of months, so I have a lot of new things to show you. And with that, I will sign off. I look forward to seeing you in the Discord discussion. I'm always interested in trading book ideas, recommendations, conversations about stuff. I'll see you there. And till next time, bye.